Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2.
Councillor Curry, report to the Ward 8 desk, please.
We'll get going in 1 minute. And good morning, everyone, and welcome to meeting number 44 of the Planning and Housing Committee. I first want to acknowledge that Ottawa is located on unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation, whose culture and presence have nurtured and continue to nurture this land. I know we have a couple of regrets from Councillor Kelly and I believe Councillor Johnson, but can I ask for a roll call, please, from the clerk?
Councillor Brockington.
Okay, apparently we're good to go. We'll resume. So on to the substantive agenda. The first item is the zoning bylaw amendment for 609, 611, 613, 615 Parkview Road. There's no presentation, no delegations. The applicants are here. If folks will indulge me for 1 minute, I just wanted to say I am voting against this amendment. I certainly understand where staff are coming from with respect to its adherence to our official plan policies. Under the previous owner, the residents had been told that the original applicant would not seek the 4th units. The property has sold. The new owner doesn't consider themselves beholden by that previous commitment. The residents on Parkview did put together a number of great presentations in the Committee of Adjustment. The Committee of Adjustment refused the original variances that would permit the triplexes. It went to the Ontario, or the LPAT, I guess, at the time, which did allow the triplexes to proceed, but the residents of Parkview are particularly sensitive. So I'll be voting just on the basis that I believe that there is a commitment that was made. Does anyone want this item held? And to Tim Eisner and Jocelyn Chandler, on behalf of the applicant, if the committee is prepared to carry this one, did you wish to present? No, I see it, head shaking. Sorry, can I just ask for a quick vote on this one, please? Okay, so dissent. We'll dispense with the voice vote as long as that dissent is noted. Thank you. Okay, thank you, colleagues. There is the application for 433 Lion Street. Did anyone want to get this one held or as a presentation? To the applicant, Team Barrett Wagar and Dale Williams, if committee's prepared to carry this, did you still wish to speak?
Good morning, Chair. No, thank you. We're fine with proceeding.
Thank you. Is that item carried? Thank you. We're going to hold the zoning bylaw amendment with respect to shelters because we do have delegations. The 2024 annual report pursuant to the Building Code Act. Staff are prepared to present if required. Did members want to receive a presentation on this one? I don't see that appetite. Is that item carried? Thank you. Or carried or received? Received. Okay, so we'll go back to the only item held, which is the shelter bylaw. Sorry, take me a moment here. It's the zoning bylaw amendment for all lands within the downtown core, interurban, suburban transects to allow shelters. I hadn't anticipated a presentation from staff, so we'll jump right into presentations. And the first presentation will be from Chris Greenshields, who is with the Vanier Community Association. I don't know if, oh, there he is. Chris, whenever you're ready, you have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for this opportunity to speak on behalf of the Vanier Community Association, VCA, concerning the proposed zoning bylaw amendment for emergency and transitional shelters. Vanier and the rest of Ward 12 have plenty of experience with shelters. This is reflected in the VCA's comments, which have been reproduced here in the staff report, along with other submissions, including that of the FCA and the Lower Town Community Association, both of which the VCA supports, as well as other community associations. Shelters have now become an issue, actually, beyond the wards and the core, as you know very well. For Vanier, we continue to face more shelters, but very limited community housing. Family shelter clients live in the only hotel, and our only physical recreation facility, Gramet, remains a shelter, so-called overflow shelter, indefinitely. For shelter use throughout the city, the zoning bylaw amendment for 333 Montreal Road in Vanier, together with council's specific directions and the site plan control approval, are the only specific planning decisions that I know of concerning shelters in the recent past. In our submission, we drew heavily on this work by City Council, and which we believe remains relevant for today's discussion and further work on the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. Let me turn now more specifically to the staff report, limited in scope to the specific directions of the council decision and a stand-pat position on zoning provisions. It does faithfully record the extensive comments by community associations and others, and I want to highlight those for you. However, the staff report only draws on lines of the official plan concerning permissions for shelters throughout the city and its removal of limits on the proximity of shelters and caps. And caps, by the way, despite what the report seems to indicate, should refer, I think, to the number of shelters, not shelter size and the number of beds. The staff report fails to refer to other key provisions in the EOP. For example, the goal for neighborhoods, namely to, quote, ensure that neighborhoods form the cornerstone of livability in Ottawa, unquote. And what about Section 10 in the EOP on public health and safety, for example, to, quote, enhance personal security through design, unquote. In plain language, it is not what is going on now in neighborhoods of Ward 12. Better shelter zoning performance standards are absolutely necessary, with policy directions on public consultation and community safety. The VCA looks forward to working with the city to get the new zoning bylaw right on shelters with proper definitions, both for clients of these facilities and neighboring residents. We urge council, when it considers this report and any committee recommendations, that more direction be given to staff to draw on public engagement as you have before you. Finally, I think we all agree that in the end, a more livable Ottawa needs housing first, not more emergency shelter. Thank you. Merci.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just looking around to see if there are any questions for you, and I don't see any. And despite the fact that I'm championing, I'll just say championing moving this zoning bylaw amendment forward. I have to agree fully with your final point. We do need housing, not shelter. Thank you, Chris. We'll move on to our next presenter, who is Andrew Lumsden. And I see Andrew making his way to the table. Good morning, Mr. Lumsden. Welcome to Planning and Housing Committee. And whenever you're ready, you'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee.
Good morning to you and all. My name is Andrew Lumsden. I have a keen interest in solutions to the affordable housing and homelessness issues. This has recently taken me to both Helsinki and Paris to learn and see what they are doing. Your committee has been asked to approve an extension to the locations in the city where emergency and transitional shelters may be built. I've tried in vain to find a definition of emergency and transitional shelters. However, I assume that it means that after the homeless stay in a shelter for a limited period of time, they go somewhere else. Where to, one wonders. If the motion before you is approved, does this mean that more shelters will be built? If so, it would be a shame. The chances of a homeless person residing in a shelter becoming reintegrated into traditional society are virtually nil. actually worse than that. Generally speaking, shelter users tend to become even more addicted to drugs and alcohol after spending a time in a shelter. So the question is, why continue to perpetuate this antiquated and ineffective response to homelessness? Have we learned nothing from the appalling experience with residential schools, children indoctrinated with Christian ways while in the custody of so-called charitable organizations? Are we aware that the 3 big shelter operators here in Ottawa are proselytizing Christianity in total contravention to Canada's fundamental rights and freedoms? It is time that we start to adopt a different approach to the issue of homelessness. We need look no further than the example set by Finland. It has abandoned shelters in favor of small, self-contained flats or bachelor apartments, as we might call them here, with round-the-clock medical and social worker support. The great thing is that the formerly homeless now have a key to their own front door. This newfound freedom is not entirely free of charge. They do get asked to pay a modest rent according to their means. As is the case here in Ottawa, most of them already receive some form of social assistance. Finally, it may come as a surprise that this relatively new housing first finish approach commenced around 2015 has been an outstanding success financially. As for one thing, the demand for emergency police and paramedic vehicles has been significantly reduced. And best of all, 40% of the formerly homeless have been successfully rehabilitated into regular society as a direct consequence of being treated with care and dignity. Thank you.
Mr. Lumsden, thank you very much for your comments. I'm looking around to see if there are any questions, and I don't see any. So thank you very much for your presentation. We'll move on to our final delegation on this item, Meg Herod. Meg is here in the room. And good morning, Ms. Herod. Whenever you're ready, you'll have 5 minutes to make a presentation to the committee. Just hit the button to turn the red light on.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Meg Herod. I'm the Policy Director at City for All Women Initiative. I'm also a registered professional planner. And I'm speaking here today for Cowie and the People's Official Plan. So I'm here to express our support for this proposed amendment. I'll start by saying that we urge committee to view this as a necessary step towards inclusion and equitable zoning. At the same time, as the previous speaker mentioned, we are not advocating for shelters as a solution. We are advocating for shelters as an enabling policy. We see this as allowing shelters in all zones, recognizing that homelessness is not just in one zone. It's not just in one neighborhood in our city. It is across our city. It is felt by everyone. So we support this amendment, and we also urge committee to include the following additions. So the definition of shelter must be inclusive to transitional and emergency shelter housing. We know that we have a problem. We know that newcomers are overrepresented in our shelter system right now and in homelessness across the city. Our recent point in time count showed that over 40% of our homeless population are newcomers. So we need this definition to be inclusive of the services that support the individuals in our community who are experiencing homelessness. We also want to ensure that accessory uses are included as to permit the size and the storage of things that folks need. So we know that that folks sometimes don't go to shelters because of the things that they have. We all have things that we hold on to, that we possess, that we love, that we care for, and folks need a place to store that. So something like an accessory use, we would want to make sure that the minimums or the maximums are permissive to allow folks to have adequate storage on site of their shelters. We also feel that separation distances are discriminatory and they should be absolutely removed. We feel that the surrounding site context, the supports, the care services, proximity to transit, public engagement, these are the things that are more important than a pre-imposed separation distance in a zoning bylaw. Transitional supportive housing must also be considered as a permitted use in all zones. Again, we know that we need to support folks along the housing continuum, and just permitting shelters needs to be more inclusive of transitional housing, supportive housing in all our zones. And our last addition is that we feel that this amendment must be expanded to include rural areas. Again, homelessness is not just a problem of our urban core. Homelessness is felt across our city, and we feel that rural folks have a right to stay where they are as well, to live in their communities. So we see this amendment as an enabling policy. Zoning should never be a barrier to achieving access to the right to housing, a recognized human right under the National Housing Strategy Act. So again, this policy to us, this amendment is enabling. It is creating a more permissive, a more equitable, a better system to allow folks to live where they want to live where they're from, to live in our community. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Harrod. I'm taking a look to see if there are any questions from committee members, and I don't see any. Thank you very much for the presentation. So if there are questions of staff at this point, feel free to raise your hand. Councillor Curry.
Thank you very much. Those were great delegations as well. When I look at what has happened here, so what has happened here is we had recommendations for shelter, for sprung structures. And then Councillor Leeper tried to help, in fact, did help by saying, you know, this became such a political mess. It might just be helpful to preempt what was already in the official plan and just, you know, early on say they can go anywhere. Now, if you looked at what happened in Canada, Barrhaven, I think there's a lot of what you could say of what happened in Canada and Barrhaven, but there were some similar questions to what we're hearing at these delegations here today. Why are we doing this? Why would we even have emergency anything, to Mr. Lumsden's point? And what are the definitions? And what are the co-located services? And who made that decision and how did that come about? So I feel like, you know, this motion here today, staff are saying, sure, go ahead and do that. But I feel like, and I don't like to say half-baked, but I think what's happening here is not fully fleshed out. This may be better than half-baked. So I'm not sure what staff imagine is the next step, but if you had delegations here from the communities that looked at sprung structures originally, and I know we're not going down that road, where would you see addressing some of those concerns? Where are the definitions? Where is the work that would go around? What has to be co-located? What would be in a emergency shelter? And what would we do to prevent us from ever having to go down that road again?
Chair, the direction from council to staff was implemented through this report. The definition that was adopted and approved by council at the time is to use the same definition as for shelter as is in the zoning bylaw currently. But to Councillor Curry's point, I may have to punt this over to the zoning team and ask them what kind of work they're doing on this. Our report was simply implementing the direction that we were given by council.
So Chair, I'll just add some opening remarks before Ms. Ruddy speaks on behalf of the zoning team. In terms of answering the question on where we are at, so we can look at this as a multi-phase process. So we're amending this current zoning bylaw 2008-250 to implement the official plan in terms of permitting shelters throughout the urban area. And then the specific definitions of the different categories will come in the new zoning bylaws. So that will be before council at the end of this year and into January 2026.
I think that Mr. Fu has answered the question. However, I can just add that there will be full permissions in accordance with the official plan policies for both emergency accommodation and transitional housing. And those permissions for transitional housing will be broad, and they come under the land use term residential care facility, which is a term which has been given broad permissions in many zones in the urban areas of the city in the draft zoning bylaw.
Okay, thank you for that. So, but when you say permissions, what about the, not just permissions, but what has to be there along with?
Through the chair, so a residential care facility has to have or provides 24/7 on-site medical and social services, among other services. So it's a wraparound type of care that is permitted within that definition.
Right within the building, though. Thanks, Mr. Chair. Sorry, I think this is becoming just a back and forth, but right within the building. You remember the comments from the community were saying, yeah, okay, if there's going to be a family doc in the building, then is that family doc available for the community that doesn't have a family doc? And if there's going to be a building there and it's going to have all these services, then does that mean that there doesn't need to be co-located services in the community that they can walk to? You know, because people were saying, well, we're putting it here on the park and ride because it's close to a grocery store. Is that something that we would have in a document that says it has to be close to a grocery store? It has to be so far from a grocery store, including there have to be other services very close, banking, whatever.
Through the chair, the definition of residential care facility is that it provides on-site services for residents of the facility. So it is focused on providing services for the residents in that building. And then in terms of any proposal to site or establish a new shelter that's outside the jurisdiction of the zoning bylaw, I think that it's housing providers that are working on, you know, establishing or proposing locations and getting funding for them for shelters in the future if they're needed. I think there's certainly an emphasis now and an obvious understanding that housing first is a better solution to the problems that people are facing right now. I think that housing staff are best positioned to answer those questions about decisions about locations for future shelters.
I would agree. I agree. Like, this is very much zoning, right? Permissions, not other direction to staff. So I guess, is there housing staff, like that department, can someone from that department respond as to whether or not they feel they need further direction? I feel like councillors need to give further direction on this. And I'm just trying to figure out where, when, how, why, not why, but where, when.
I'll let staff determine whether that's something they want to handle today or.
Chair, I don't believe there are members of housing staff here today. Happy to take that back and extend the comments to them, but I don't believe there
are online staff from Community and Social Services Department.
I think Ms. Klug is online. Feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So housing services staff would be working with our colleagues in planning, services if a proposal were to come in for a new shelter or transitional housing facility. And we would be looking at proximity to services that those folks who are using those transitional or shelter uses would need. There would be services provided on site, but in terms of things like proximity to grocery stores, we're looking at those things similar to if someone was proposing a new residential apartment building. We want to make sure that the folks who are temporarily living in these spaces have access to important services. And there may be situations where a service provider can provide either transportation or bring services on site so that these folks have what they need. Does that answer that question?
Yeah, I think it does. I think it shows me that we need a little bit more direction maybe to housing services staff on this. So I understand we're here for bylaw, fair enough, but I am glad we had this conversation because maybe there's something between now and council or even after that we could get more clarity on this. So just so that we don't have to deal with the politics of it and there's more clarity in general for everyone, for councillors to go back to their communities to say, this is what we have assurances will be looked at or looked for or whatever. So this has been helpful and I'm interested to hear what others have to say. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor Curry. I've got a couple of thoughts on that, but I'll go to Councillor Lowe.
Thanks, Chair. More so comments than questions. Like originally this was sort of framed as an honest conversation about shelters and shelter permissions, but we're sort of choosing the will of council is sort of choosing to bypass the remaining 9 months of the process we approved 2 years ago. I don't think that's an honest conversation. And that's not the only contradiction that I believe we're looking at right now. Among the movers' reasons was to lighten staff's workload, but we tasked them with what's essentially work that's redundant to the ongoing zoning bylaw update while staff were still working on that update. There also seems to be a belief that presumption of what the public feedback will be is licensed to bypass public consultation and engagement, like the 2 rounds of public consultation remaining in the zoning bylaw process. And yet an exception was created for the site in Canada, previously identified for a sprung structure, to ensure that community's voice was heard, which I think is right. But further yet, the sites that were previously identified in my community were denied that opportunity. And then further yet, there was a vote against the first item on today's agenda on the basis of a commitment to the community, even though the file met the intent of the official plan. So at council back in February, one of our colleagues on the zoning bylaw sponsors group asked if there was low-hanging fruit that could be accelerated and addressed immediately earlier in the process. Staff shared the preference to keep the zoning bylaw update as one document, and yet here we are voting on basically accelerating one part. So expanding shelter permissions does not serve or advance the city's housing first policy. Perhaps my sensitivity to the issue is heightened, but we saw what happens when things are rushed with sprung structure. The initial location selection, procurement, lack of public consultation, all rushed, bypassed, and bungled to the point where conversations strayed far from the actual item towards questions about process and public trust. Shelter and housing as a whole is and has been a truly important topic of conversation that we seem to be destined to muddle again on the basis of bad process to bring the item forward by a mere 9 months or so. This is indeed a half-baked item, to use my colleague's term there. I will be voting against it and will be asking for a recorded vote. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Lowe. Councillor Troster.
Thanks, Chair. I don't know how many times we need to remind ourselves that we're in the midst of an actual emergency. Our latest homelessness point in time count showed more than 3,000 people experiencing homelessness. And as I have said before, and I will say again, we need to empower staff to act in the face of an emergency. We would not make them come back to council or go to a zoning bylaw review meeting if they suddenly needed to set up a shelter from another storm, another derecho. This is the same as far as I'm concerned. And if you want to know how bad the crisis is, I am happy to take you on a tour of my community. As Councillor Leeper, as Chair Leeper has said many times, we don't do people zoning. This is an archaic piece of the old zoning bylaw that is discriminatory in nature. It forces a rezoning process simply because of the kinds of people that are in a shelter. Let's be really, really honest here. I don't think it's dishonest at all. And I also think Chair Leeper brought this forward because of the emergency we're in now, and because we need staff to be able to move swiftly. That means if there's a piece of land for sale, they need to be able to buy it. If there's a building that can be converted, they need to be able to convert it. That doesn't mean that housing staff aren't doing due consultation with the community. They are incredibly engaged with the community. And I trust that they're smart enough to understand what would be an ideal or a not ideal location for a shelter of this nature. Also, let's not forget, a lot of these shelters provide 3 meals a day. So some of the concerns about there not being services nearby, a lot of these models involve in-house services. And so the more that we allow communities to politicize a decision that I believe is one of an emergency nature, I think we are creating a false expectation of what people deserve to be consulted about. We don't get to consult about who comes into our community. That is fundamentally discriminatory. So I'm really glad to see this come forward, and I'll be voting for it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Trusser. Vice Chair Gower.
Thanks, Chair. I guess I was planning to say many of the things the previous speaker said, that the reason for the expediency in moving this particular policy ahead of the official plan by 9 months is because of the nature of the emergency and the crisis. And that is I think, a strong rationale for bringing this forward. And it's not just about sprung shelters either, although that's certainly top of mind for a lot of people. It's about ensuring if there is a organization that wants to provide an emergency shelter for women and children fleeing violence, that they don't have to go through the extra process and time and expense to bring that through planning committee where it might not be allowed now. And we've had examples of those over the past few years. So I'll definitely support what's in front of us today. Thanks, Chair, for raising it originally and seeing it through.
Thanks, Vice Chair. Councillor Tierney.
Great, thank you, Chair. First, I just wanted to point out that this problem was brought to you by your federal government. They created this problem, but the good news is we're seeing platform promises coming out every single day about how they're going to address what is an issue that they actually help create. But at the same time, we've always requested money from the federal government, even before we had people coming from other countries where we didn't have homes. And now we're trying to establish those using sprung shelters and temporary housing and all these things that frankly is not the way we want to do things. So when you see people of all party stripes, and I suggest strongly you push them hard. I know FCM certainly has that as one of their platform planks, is to ensure that we talk about homelessness and housing and to actually establish real housing for people, not just fake housing. So at the end of the day, we have to get this going, keep moving along. At the same time, let's keep our eyes on this federal election. This is the first time they're actually paying attention to municipalities that I can remember. And let's take advantage of that. Let's press all of our candidates that are running in the area for their commitment to actually establishing real housing. They have the wallets for it. Let's make them do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Well raised. Thank you, Councillor Tierney. Councillor Kavanaugh.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I will be supporting this motion. As Chair of Ottawa Community Housing, I know more than, as we all know, that we need permanent housing, absolutely. And I just want to reiterate that the funds are needed there for sure. But when we have homeless people, we have to do something quickly. And but we also need to build quickly. And I appreciate that this is a federal election. Everyone's talking it up. So hopefully we'll see that. But we do need the nonprofit housing, social housing, to support people, to get them on their feet. So I just want to remind people that that's not forgotten. That is the goal. And we hope to achieve it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kavanaugh. I don't see any further speakers. I'll just wrap this one up. Oh, I'm very sorry, Councillor Dudas. I'm sorry. I apologize.
I just wanted to note that, you know, housing is not a one size fits all. It's not a one type of person. We have a strong, overwhelming surge of newcomers to Canada that are overwhelming our current shelter system. But we also have a significant number of families in need. And we have women who are seeking shelter from abusive situations. We have people with mental health addictions. We have veterans seeking supports. It's not one type of person we are looking at. And to handcuff staff so that they can look across our city for sites that might provide housing to any of these type of individuals is important, because if it's a family, they might need access to schools and grocery stores and transit. If it's people who have mental health issues, they might need those types of supports and access to amenities serving that type of need. So what I see, I agree completely that there needs to be a greater discussion by staff with our communities and with us when they consider these sites. I've recently gone through this very example with a transitional housing site in my ward where it was a convent that was sold to the city. And there was very little, if no discussion with myself and the community prior to the acquisition of this property. However, over time, having had the opportunity to talk to my community about it and work with them, we're now looking at it as an opportunity. There is still concern and there's still questions, and that will come with time, those answers. But the plain fact is if we only house people who need housing in the core, we're only going to see problems in the core of our city. But if we have scattered shelter systems and housing first as a priority, in every environ of our community, including rural and suburban and urban, we will then be able to incorporate these people who desperately want to have a better life into our amazing communities, providing the services and support that they need to succeed. Because if we only put them in one area, we are just setting the stage for them to fail. So I do support this happening in terms of supporting this this motion and this quick movement. We are in an emergency. We need to address it as such. But I do agree with my colleagues that greater communication from staff when they're seeking these sites with the councillor and the community is utmost to it being successful.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dudas.
Mr. Chair, just before you wrap up, so when I was speaking, you said you had some comments, so I'm hoping you're going to say something. And then second of all, I would like some guidance in terms of the rest of the clarity that staff might need if it's social services, if you have some direction on where that might happen or how that could happen.
Thanks. I don't actually have specific direction, but I just wanted to clarify what that might be. But just to wrap up, I do want to thank staff very much. Council passed the direction to create this amendment just a few weeks ago. It's in front of us, and I appreciate that staff are moving at the speed with which this emergency needs to be addressed. So thank you for getting this back in front of committee fairly quickly. It is the end of a very long public process. Again, more for the sake of people who may be watching this online, our official plan, which was consulted for a couple of years with the general public, wound up saying that we would permit emergency shelters and transitional shelters as a permitted use in all urban designations and zones. And that would be done through a zoning bylaw. I don't remember, I guess it was probably 2022 when the minister finally, after several years of consultation and council debate, signed off on the official plan. So this is an amendment that is probably 5 years in the making at this point. So lots of opportunity for consultation. I did want to point out as well, as I get towards Councillor Curry's point, that the zoning issue was irrelevant to the Nepean proposed sprung structure. It would not have required a zoning bylaw amendment in order to move forward. What that means is that the staff decision to propose a sprung structure for the Nepean site wasn't subject to planning committee vote or political direction there. We've delegated the authority to propose sites for things like sprung structures to staff. And I believe that that is under the purview of the Social Services Committee, the Community Services Committee. If we want to put direction around their criteria for choosing sites, that would best be done at Councillor Dudas's committee, because the zoning is irrelevant to some of the decisions that they're making. There is no zoning bylaw amendment required for the Nepean site. The Canada site, yes, that would have been subject to an additional layer of decision-making by this committee. But in many cases, that zoning permission is not required. So if you want to provide direction to staff to say, when you're considering where to put a transitional or emergency shelter site, and you want them to consult with the local councillor or with the committee, that's a direction that should be brought to community services. Does that help at all? Okay. In that case, to Councillor Lowe's request, I'll ask for a recorded vote, please.
Councillor Brockington,
Yes.
Councillor Curry. Yes.
Yes.
Councillor Dudas,
Yes.
Councillor Johnson, Councillor Kavanaugh,
Yes.
Councillor Kitts,
Yes.
Councillor Lowe,
No.
Councillor Tierney,
Yes.
Councillor Troster,
Yes.
Vice Chair Gower,
Yes.
Chair,
Yes.
9 yeas, 1 nay.
Okay, that one carries. Thank you very much, colleagues. That'll go to council next. Sorry, so I think everyone knows the motion that had been brought by, or the notice of motion that had been given by Councillor Kavanaugh. That motion's been withdrawn on the new Taywin community lands in the official plan. I don't have any in-camera items. There was an excellent report. Thank you very much for the thoroughness of it on the progress towards achieving the Housing Acceleration Fund. Thank you very much for that. Councillors are urged to take a look at that. Are there any notices of motion for subsequent meetings? I don't see any. Inquiries, I know Councillor Gower has one.
I do. Thanks, Chair. On March 19th, 2025, notice was provided to this committee on a motion regarding Taywin community lands. The mover has withdrawn the motion with the intention to reintroduce it at a later date. Moreover, the motion contained a number of contentions respecting Taywin that residents have raised questions about. Staff had indicated that they intended to provide comment on the motion. This information is still useful for better informing the public's understanding about Taywin and related matters. With that in mind, what are staff's full comments on the March 19th notice of motion respecting Taywin? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair. I don't see any other inquiries. We don't have any other business, so we're adjourned until our meeting Wednesday, April 23rd. Thank you very much, colleagues. At 1 o'clock as advertised, so we've got some time to grab some lunch. Thank you.